Welcome back to my channel, guys. Greetings from Barcelona, Spain. By the way, this is a new shirt that I felt was very fitting to bring to Barcelona. I call it my Japanese peasant chic aesthetic. Japanese in particular because it's a Japanese brand. Kuyigo, I've talked about this brand before. They're not sponsoring this video, though they should because I mention them a lot in my videos. It's practically all that I wear anymore. I buy these on Amazon. You know, I like to bring a little bit of sex appeal, but also a little bit of elegance if I can. I love this little detail here, hence Japanese peasant chic. Anyway, back to the video. So this is actually not my first time in Barcelona. I came here in 2018 as part of a Euro trip that I did. But my recollection of Barcelona is basically a fever dream. Literally, I was really sick and I was just so out of it. And I remember it was summer, it was so hot out. And so, you know, when it's hot out and you're sick, you're basically just sweating the entire time. But I remember really enjoying Barcelona and thinking it's a cool city, it's unusual, I have to come back when I feel 100% sometime in the future. So here I am as part of this trip to Europe in 2024. I knew I had to come back to Spain and I wanted to make sure I stopped by Barcelona. So the vibe of Barcelona to me is a very eerie place, and I mean that as a compliment. It's a cool, unique place. The architecture has this sandy yellow color. Throughout the city, you see it. The only other place in the world that I've seen that kind of texture, I guess, or color palette, motif, we can say, architecture motif, is in Cairo, Egypt. And much like Cairo, Egypt, actually, it's beautiful and it's unique, but there's also here, just like in Cairo, this rawness to the city, meaning it's not polished. And I don't know if that's intentional or just a lack of maintenance of these buildings. It brings the city a certain level of like mystique and like an edge to it. I'm actually staying in the Gothic quarter where this is maybe more prevalent than other parts of the city. So it's a cool edge, but at the same time, I would say the city is not very clean. And of course you could say that about any major city, right? Any major city, there are areas that are just not as clean, not as well maintained. But here it's another level. It's not just like trash on the street. There's a dustiness to Barcelona that is palpable. And funny enough, same thing in Cairo, Egypt. I remember thinking this city's very dusty. There was one day here where it was actually very windy and I could not keep my eyes open walking down the street. That's how much dust and I guess like debris on the ground got lifted through the wind. And I looked around me at one point and everybody else was like, same thing, like everybody's bugging out and couldn't see straight. So I don't know what that's about. I was talking to a guy on an app here who said that the city's very polluted and that's why this phenomenon happens here. I also read online that Barcelona constantly has construction going on, which I have also noticed. So I think it might also be that element. One thing that's also really interesting about Barcelona is, especially in the Gothic quarter area where I'm staying, this is the oldest neighborhood in the city. So coming to Barcelona, like many other European cities, you feel like you're going back in time, right? It's like a time warp. You see the history around you. And yet in other ways, there are elements to this city that are super, super modern. And that's always fascinating to me, this juxtaposition of modernity versus history and more sort of antiquated elements. You know, living in the United States, I feel like we have traded as a country charm and culture for convenience, meaning every time that I travel outside of the US, I'm reminded of how efficient a lot of things in America are in terms of technology, in terms of payment. And in Europe, I'm often reminded of how a lot of things are still done in more old school ways, but then bizarrely other things will be done in a more modern way that we don't have in the States. And I'm like, why is it not like this in the States? So a random example, getting here at the airport in Barcelona, I couldn't find for the life of me the rideshare area. Like when you arrive at the airport, usually there's, you know, this is where you get taxis, this is where you get picked up, this is where parking is, and this is the Uber, Lyft, etc. section. It was so poorly indicated that I was doing circles around the airport. When I finally found it, you couldn't get an Uber. Barcelona, and maybe just Spain in general, forces you to accept all these terms in Uber. They have to verify your identity first, and then you can call an Uber. And that whole process, I discovered takes like 5 to 10 minutes. So by the time I got approved, I was already in a taxi on the way to the city. So there's stuff like that that is just not, you're just like annoyed. You're like, why is this not modern? Why is this not efficient? But then, you know, I'm here in Europe for about 6 weeks. So of course I have to wash my clothes. And my strategy so far has been every time to ask a hotel if I can do laundry service, which is, you know, you're paying for the convenience. It's always super overpriced, but it's just the easiest thing while I'm here in transit. And here at the hotel in Barcelona, they were like, we don't do that. But here's a laundromat like 10 blocks away. So I was like, fuck, a laundromat. Like back in my New York City days, I used to go to the laundromat every few weeks and it was always such a pain. You have to bring quarters, you have to bring your own detergent, so you're walking around with a jug of detergent. You're always like competing with people for the machines because there aren't enough. So I went to this laundromat in Barcelona thinking like, this is gonna ruin my day. You guys, most efficient thing ever. The laundromat, you could pay by credit card at the machine. The machine translates to whatever language you speak. So I'm doing everything in English. It was like 5 buttons that I had to press max. And then I'm like, where's the detergent, right? I look at the machine, the washing machine, and it says in Spanish that detergent is included. So it literally dispersed it while the machine was going. I'm like, this is incredible. Felt like I was in a laundromat from 2050, like from the future. But I would say out of all the cities so far, Barcelona has that most jarring juxtaposition of constant things that feel more old school and like an old European city versus this modernity. Like walking around, I've noticed a lot of startups are here. I walked by a Monday office. Monday is that company, if you're not familiar, you might have seen commercials. It's I guess it's like a software tool that office companies will use. I think it's for project management. I've noticed that every time I paid for something at a coffee shop, at a supermarket, a restaurant, a bar, whatever, the payment screens here are super modern. Like some of them are the same ones we see in the States where it's like an iPad and you have to sign, right? And you tap your card. But I've also seen ones that are the size of a phone and there's no buttons other than just, you know, accept, reject, and like entering a code if you have a PIN number for your card. Even more ahead again than in the States. So I found this juxtaposition fascinating. Another thing that's noteworthy about Barcelona is that it's going through this over-tourism problem currently. You might have seen videos about a month ago at the time of this video. There were videos on TikTok that went viral of tourists getting harassed by locals, protesting, telling them to go home, get out of Barcelona, and spraying the tourists with water guns. The reason that there's this hostility and this tension is that a lot of the apartment buildings here in Barcelona are being used for Airbnbs and short-term rentals. So essentially the local population is like, we can't even live here because there isn't enough housing for us. The tourists are getting catered to more than us. In addition to that, Barcelona is notorious for pickpocketing. Constantly I've had people tell me to watch myself, to not hold on to my phone too much in public, make sure they're in my pockets, and that I'm holding on to stuff in my pockets, not just like lollylagging. Personally, I haven't had any safety concerns the entire time that I've been here. I don't know if I just got lucky. I don't know if I've been mindful. I'm not sure what it is, but I haven't experienced any of this. I haven't had people harass me. Overall, I've had a pleasant experience in this city. I just wouldn't come back this same time of year again because it's literally 90 degrees at the time that I'm here. I always forget that the Mediterranean in Europe is a wildly different climate than like London, Paris, you know, the upper north. Where I was in Amsterdam, I was literally cold. It's summer and yet I was cold in Amsterdam. Here, I'm like dying of heat stroke. But here's what's really neat. The area where I'm staying in the Gothic Quarter, there's constant shade and there's all these little paths to go through, to the point where I wondered, was this built with that in mind, right? All these cities were built obviously pre-modern electricity, pre-air conditioning, and also just pre-modern hygiene of being able to take a shower every day. So I wondered, was the Gothic Quarter actually built with that in mind, of purposely creating shade in a good portion of the area so that when it's this hot, it's not like diabolical because you're not actually feeling the sunlight. Final sort of first impression here is that it's a very youthful city. And youthful cities tend to feel more dynamic, right? And there's more of like an energy that you feel. I don't know why it's so youthful. I don't know if it's a university thing. I don't know if it's just a place that people find very exciting in Europe. But it's kind of nice to have that flavor of seeing young people everywhere out and about. So gay travel in Barcelona. There is a gay neighborhood here. I hope I'm not going to butcher this, but it's called Exemple. At least I'm saying it the French way. I'm hoping that's close enough. And people will cheekily call it, is that a word, cheekily? In a cheeky way, they'll call it Gay Exemple. Again, hoping I'm saying that right, but basically connecting gay and Exemple, the name of the neighborhood, to make it one word. So walking towards this area, even without rainbow flags or seeing like gay bars, I quickly sort of realized I was finally in this neighborhood when I just started seeing gay guys around me. It just became obvious. You know, it's from the way guys will dress, the way they'll look at you, the way, you know, mannerisms and stuff. I was like, okay, suddenly I'm seeing a lot more gay people. This is it. This is the gay neighborhood. You get to a certain area where you can tell the businesses are catering more to gay men in terms of clothing, fashion, swimwear, of course, a ton of gay bars. In describing the men here, I find Spain, just like the south of France where I was before this, I find Spain very interesting because there's very much a melting pot of diversity, right? You have the Spanish guys who look more European, we'll say, but Spain is also a Mediterranean country, and at the tip of Spain you have Morocco. So you have this North African and Arab influence, as well as the Mediterranean influence, and of course a more sort of, I guess, traditional European influence, and you have all of that sort of blended together in Barcelona. I've always thought of Barcelona as a gay city. You know how there are just places around the world that are known to be more gay friendly, to have larger gay populations. So I've always thought of Barcelona as that, and there is a gay neighborhood here. So I think that's a valid thought. But what's interesting is checking out the apps here. When I went on Grindr, very quickly, the guys that I would see, the profiles that I would see, once I would add a few filters in, they were farther and farther away, like 5 miles away, 10 miles away, 50 miles away. And I was shocked by that because I just thought it would be more densely populated with gay men. But I didn't have that same observation on other apps like Tinder and Bumble, the more traditional dating apps. So even though my conclusion at first was that there's just fewer gay guys in the city compared to your typical metropolis, I actually think it's more connected to what a viewer said on, I think, my last video, the South of France video in Nice, France. A viewer said that in these parts of Europe, gay guys use Grindr less, and they'll use other hookup apps that are more, that cater more, I guess, to the European community than Grindr. So that might actually be valid here, considering how many profiles I did see on apps like Tinder and Bumble. I've gotten the vibe that the guys here are flaky. Now, of course, I'm just traveling here for a short amount of time, so this is just a first impression kind of thing, an observation. And it could also be, of course, I'm aware that because I'm traveling, guys might just not want to talk to me as much because, you know, there's so many visitors here. We discussed the over-tourism problem. It might just be that locals would prefer to talk to other locals. I'm the same way when I'm in Miami where I live. But literally every guy I've matched with here on Bumble or Tinder, and there's been like 5 to 10 guys, not one of them has responded to me, which I find unusual in any city, that 0 out of the people who you match with talk to you or don't even respond to you. Grindr, similar thing. Some guys, we started talking and then they kind of just disappeared. Now, of course, this is dating apps 101, right? This happens in any city, that there's flakiness or ghosting. But this has been the majority of guys that I've connected with or tried to connect with. So I find that kind of interesting. The charm that I experienced when I was in Paris with guys being inquisitive and asking me if I want to get a drink with them and how long am I staying, and this I'm not experiencing here. That's pretty much it for my experience here. I'm gonna hit up some museums the rest of the day, and then in 48 hours I'm off to Madrid, the final stop of this trip for me in Europe this summer. I'm very excited to go to Madrid because I've never been, and it's one of the only places on this trip that I've never explored at all. My understanding is that Madrid is also a very gay-friendly city. It's also just a bigger city and more populated than Barcelona. It's the capital of Spain, Madrid. So I'm very curious to see how it differs from Barcelona here in Spain. If you're curious to see how that compares to my experience here in Barcelona, make sure to stay tuned. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And if you have any thoughts or questions on this video, let me know below. If you've been to Barcelona, or maybe you live in Barcelona or have lived in Barcelona, of course, I want to know what you think, what you can share with the class. See you guys next time.